Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Infantry Pulse, and today we'll be taking a tour of my Anima Season Aether Raids defense team for Fire Emblem Heroes. Just like we did in the Dark Season tour, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of my defense setup, as well as talking about the merits of an Infantry Pulse team broadly. Hopefully you'll come away from the video having a little bit better idea of what you can do to improve your Aether Raids defense strategy. With that being said, we'll go ahead and get right into it, and the first unit I want to discuss today is Jorge. Jorge is actually our newest Heroic Grails unit that we just got, and he is actually quite good in terms of Heroic Grail units because of this preferred weapon he has. So he has the Daniel-made bow. So it was made by his brother Daniel, thus Daniel-made bow. So it actually has the slaying effect, so it has -1 special cooldown built into it. It also has a drive attack 5 effect, so essentially any allies that are within 2 spaces of him get +5 attack bonus, which is really great actually, in terms of being a support unit as well as a frontliner. Also, any enemies that are within 2 spaces of him receive a -5 attack debuff. And that's really great, because that's not just for Daniel. So if an opponent within 2 spaces of Daniel engages against someone like, say, Mirabilis, or engages against Soth, as long as that enemy is within 2 spaces of Jorge, Daniel-made bow is going to give him a -5 attack debuff. So he does run Bonfire, which after the slaying effect is a 2-turn cooldown special. Then he runs Quicken Pulse, which gets to -1, and then an Infantry Pulse from Dorothea actually means that Bonfire is ready to go on the first engagement. This is good because Jorge has pretty high defense naturally, and it's only improved upon by Thrasier's +5 defense mythic bonus. He also runs Attack Defense Unity, which is a new skill that just came off of Brave Dimitri on the recent Choose Your Legends banner. So that is some premium fodder right there, but it is actually a really great skill for Daniel. It gives him his relevant stats, which are attack and defense, just +5 as long as he's within 2 spaces of an ally, and he is in his starting space, obviously within 2 spaces of an ally. He's right next to Mirabilis, and if he engages, oftentimes what will happen is, because this is a rally trap, Ophelia will fly over from guidance onto this false heavy trap right here and stand right there after being danced by Mirabilis. And then if Jorge engages, that means he's going to go down here by this blue lion's flag, probably, and he will be within 2 spaces of Ophelia then. So that means that Attack Defense Unity is active many times. So Attack Defense Unity has the effect of Attack Defense Bond, in that it gives +5 to both of those stats, but it has the additional effect of taking any penalties that are on Jorge and reversing them into bonuses. So not only does it neutralize those penalties, it also flips them. So let's say that Jorge has a -5 attack debuff from a Tamari dagger that the opponent uses, and then a -5 or -7 defense debuff from Chill Defense 3. Those two things actually become a +5 attack buff and a +7 defense buff on top of the +5 to both those stats he gets from the skill naturally. So Attack Defense Unity is a great skill just in general, but it's great on Daniel because those are his 2 most important stats for his damage output, because we want to stack defense to get that Bonfire active. Now he runs Attack Defense Lull, which is great for 2 reasons. One, the defense part of that improves his damage. It means that any visible buffs the opponent has on their defense are neutralized, and they also receive a -3 debuff. But also, the -3 attack debuff stacks up with the -5 that came from Daniel-made bow. So anytime you're in combat with this Jorge, you'll have -8 attack. Any enemy is going to have -8 attack. It makes his survivability very good. It makes him very sturdy as a unit. So that's really great, especially against physical damage because of all the defense stacking we've done here. So he really tanks physical hits very well. He does have Infantry Pulse here. That's to pulse everyone below him, which in this case is really just Thrasier is a relevant one he's pulsing. And we already talked about Quicken Pulse. Now, as far as Attack Defense Unity goes, that's a great skill for him. We already talked about how awesome that skill is. I actually don't think it's ideal, though. I think the ideal skill here for his A slot is going to be Sturdy Impact. Sturdy Impact also gives the relevant stats. It gives attack and defense, but that follow-up denying effect is very good for Jorge because he has pretty low speed. It's not super tanked like Mirabilis' for example, but it is very low. 27 speed is low. He will often get doubled in retaliation. So he'll fire off his bonfire along with all the bonuses he's going to get to his attack stat from things like attack, defense, unity. But he's not going to always kill an opponent. And that means most opponents will double him back in retaliation. And that will usually kill Jorge even with his high defenses and high HP. So I think that Sturdy Impact is going to be better for the A-slot skill. I just don't have that fodder right now. Once I do, I'll replace it. But I think Attack Defense Unity is also a good option, especially because Attack Defense Unity is active on both phases. So if someone comes up here, straight by the Black Eagles and Blue Lions banners, and they attack Jorge from this space next to the Blue Lions banner, for example, he is going to have those extra attack and defense stats, which is great for him. So there's a little give and take there. You can get the two-phase kind of bonuses that you get from something like your attack defense unity or even attack defense push 4. Those are both skills that are active in both phases. But I think the follow-up denying effect from Sturdy Impact, even though it's only active on the player phase, on the unit's phase, I think that's still better overall. But that's something to be discussed. So next up we have Mirabilis, and Mirabilis is probably one of the best defensive mythics we have in the game right now. The reason behind that is because not only is she a dancer, which is very valuable to you generally, but also she has really great debuffing abilities. It makes her a really good support unit broadly, beyond just dancing. She can dance very well, but she can also aid your team and make them a lot stronger. And the reason behind that is because of Flower of Ease as well as Whimsical Dream. So Flower of Ease is her preferred weapon. It actually gives her +3 res, which is good for soaking all kinds of Dark Shrines and chill res. She actually does have the highest combined defense and res after her default fort defense res is there. She actually has the highest combined defense res, which means she soaks Dark Shrine. She also soaks chill res. And so when you build your team, you want to have support units like your Mirabilis here soak as many of those debuffs that are pretty common as possible. So you want them to soak chills, you want them to soak shrines as much as possible. So you've got the chill res hitting here. That's good because you don't want Jorge to get hit by chill res, because his res is already pretty okay. It's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just okay. You don't want him to get hit by chill res, because that's going to make him a sitting duck for any res type attacks. So she does have lower defense than Jorge right now, though, but that's good for Jorge, remember, because he has attack defense unity. So we want his defense to be the highest on the team, so he gets hit by things like chill defense, and that actually improves his overall bulk in terms of the physical bulk, as well as his output from Bonfire. So that's why we have stacked up Mirabilis in this way. Anyway, back to Flower of Ease. So Flower of Ease gives an additional debuff to any unit that has a penalty. And so we have lots of ways to get penalties on opponents with this team. You have your Dark Shrine, you have your Bright Shrine, we have a Chill here from Mirabilis, you have your Panic Manor, you have your Tactics Room, you have Panic Smoke from Thrasier. You have your debuffs from even these daggers that give debuffs. All kinds of debuffs possible from Mirabilis. If they have any of those penalties active on them, that means they get an additional attack defense res -3. So that's going to make your units more survivable because of that attack debuff, as well as hit harder because of the defensive debuffs that she provides. And that goes in any 3 columns that are centered around Mirabilis. So any of the ones under Mirabilis, any of the ones under Soth, any of the ones under Jorge when she's standing in this spot right here, are going to receive that debuff. And so that's why we put her here more centrally located for the team, because those debuffs go in any of the lanes that your opponent will commonly engage in. Sometimes you'll get a disarm trap user that can engage from this bolt trap, but more often than not, they're going to engage on those 3 columns centered around Mirabilis. And because of that, Flower of Ease is almost always active. Makes your units a lot stronger. It's a really great weapon, actually, in terms of supporting your team. Now, Whimsical Dream is her unique dance, so it is a refresh, so it's going to allow them to get another action, which is good. That's what we have her on the team for, right? But additionally, it's going to give everyone within 2 spaces of the unit you danced on your team +5 attack. So usually what's going to happen is Ophelia's going to hop over onto this false heavy trap like we talked about before. She's going to rally either Soth or Mirabilis, and when she does that, then she's going to get danced by Mirabilis almost every single time. She's going to get danced right away by Mirabilis, and because, if you notice, this false heavy trap is within 2 spaces of the entire team, that means the whole team is getting +5 attack from Whimsical Dream. So that's really, really great. That means the whole team is buffed up with Whimsical Dream, which is really cool. You have to be wary of panic from the enemy team. That can be not super great. But it is still a great buff if you're not getting panic. That means your whole team just got 5 attacks stronger. Additionally, any enemies within 4 spaces of the unit that got danced, which again is usually going to be Ophelia standing on this false heavy trap, any unit that is in 4 spaces of Ophelia there, and then 2 spaces of that enemy. So let's say that we have a Brave Ike standing right here next to this tactics room, for example. And then behind him, 2 spaces away, is the Brave Lucina supporting him. That means that Brave Ike and Brave Lucina both are going to get -5 attack. And not only is that great because it makes your units more sturdy, it makes your opponents weaker, so it makes your units more sturdy, it also means they now have a penalty active on them, which means Flower of Ease is active. So if for some reason they didn't get hit by any of the other penalties, Mirabilis has this internal synergy between Flower of Ease and Whimsical Dream that allows her to provide massive debuffs on the opponent. Effectively -8 attack, -3 defense res. That's really good. That's really good. So that's why Mirabilis is such a great refresher, such a great dancer. Also, the fact that she's a flyer means that she has access to these mobility skills that we'll talk about in a second. So she has Moonbow. It's a low cooldown special. That's why she has Moonbow. In reality, she will almost never fire off a Moonbow. She's not meant to attack. She has a pretty low attack of 48. That's good. That means she dances more than she attacks, and that's what you want from Mirabilis. You want her to dance. You don't want her to enter combat with the enemy. So we have Moonbow because it's a low cooldown, and in the off chance that she does end up attacking an enemy, then Moonbow can charge up faster and improve her damage a little bit. Again, that's never the goal to have happen, but if it does need to happen, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, as the old adage goes. So we already talked about the good of Fortress Defense because of the +6 attack and res, but also understand that the +6 defense and res, but also understand that the -2 attack is actually a good thing for Mirabilis. A dancer will attack an enemy if they can deal 5 damage to that enemy. If they can deal at least 5 damage, they will attack instead of dancing. So you want your dancers to not really stack attack usually, unless you're building them to be a hybrid attacker/dancer. Like if you're building up a Hoshiden Summer Micaiah, for example. That's a unit that both attacks and dances and supports. Or even my Summer Dorothea that I've got here. She's built to both attack and support. Mirabilis is not that. Mirabilis is built to be a support unit, and so you want her attack to be very low, so she engages on fewer enemies. And so her default Fortress Defense res is the ideal skill for her. Next up, we have Sabotage Defense, which is not a super ideal skill. It is her default skill. And the reason why it's not super ideal is, like we talked about before, if I have, for example, a Brave Ike up here by the tactics room and a Brave Lucina behind him supporting him, that Brave Ike isn't adjacent to an enemy, so he's not going to get hit by Sabotage Defense. Here's where it is good, though, although it's not going to often debuff those tanks that are set up to withstand a lot of blows. It is going to debuff. A lot of times people will place units somewhere over here, and those units will often be adjacent to each other. They'll often be standing next to each other. And they think they're safe because they're out of the danger zone or whatever. They'll get that -7 debuff, and then a unit like Soth, after being danced, can come over here and attack those enemies that have a -7 defense debuff. And that can be really good against something like a Naga, for example, that can have, you know, relatively high defenses depending on how you stack her preferred weapon and how close she is to allies. That makes Soth's first engagement and Jorge's first engagement a lot stronger against these enemies that have been hit by Sabotage Defense. And you might ask, why not run something like Wings of Mercy? Well, again, she is a melee dancer, and this is a full range team. So if a ranged unit like Jorge comes in and attacks a unit that's standing down here below the Black Eagles banner, kind of diagonal for the Black Eagles banner, and both those units survive, but Jorge gets in Wings of Mercy range, then Mirabilis can actually come down and attack that unit instead of dancing anyone. And we don't want that for her. We want her to always be dancing because of Whimsical Dream's great effects, and also because she's just not a great combat unit. You don't want her to go in and engage. Even though she has these super high defenses, she has really low speed and low HP, so she's not as tanky as you might think by looking at her super great 38 defense, super great 44 res. It's deceptive because she's slow and because her HP is relatively low. So she does run Guidance, so that's why she runs Sabotage Defense as opposed to Wings of Mercy. So she runs Guidance, which sets up our rally trap. So like we said before, Ophelia will come down, she'll get rallied, and then she'll immediately get danced by Whimsical Dream. And when that happens, that actually expands the danger area to 2 more spaces. So when Ophelia is standing over here on the False Heavy Trap, that means this spot under the Tactics room and this spot to the right of the fortress are suddenly in the danger zone when they were not before. So people that place units there thinking they're safe will not have a good time. They're not going to be very happy when they get hit by an Ophelia coming down. That also, Guidance can also be great if, for whatever reason, Mirabilis ends up dancing Jorge. So if Jorge comes down here by the Blue Lion's banner, attacks someone tanking from this right corner of the danger zone, then what can happen is she can actually Guidance. Let's say that Jorge attacks, the tank lives, he attacks again, the tank lives again. So the tank has now gone through 2 reps against Jorge. Jorge is dead. Mirabilis is standing over here on this false bolt trap. That means Soth can then hop over and then hit the tank with an Ignis. So that tank then would have taken 2 attacks from Jorge, including a bonfire attack, and then an Ignis from Soth. That makes this spot over here, this front right corner of the tanking area, much better. Much better. Much harder to live through all that. Ophelia also has access to that front right corner. So an opponent might put a unit there thinking, oh, only Jorge can hit there. This spot right here. Only Jorge can hit there. But in reality, you have potentially three units that have access to that spot. And that's going to be much harder to tank through than just tanking to Jorge. So that's why Guidance is super great there. That's also why I use it as opposed to ground orders, because if I use ground orders, only Dorothea and Jorge would be getting hit by it, so Guidance is much better in this specific formation. Ground orders is a great skill, but in this specific formation, Guidance is better. She runs Chill Speed for a lot of the same reasons that my Azura runs Chill Speed as opposed to Chill Attack in the Dark Season. So the reason why we run Chill Speed as opposed to Chill Attack is that if a unit does end up engaging against, say, Jorge over here, if they do end up engaging against Jorge has pretty low speed, he'll probably get doubled, and that means he'll probably go down. Even though he has the -8 attack, he has good defenses, he probably will go down if an opponent wisely engages against him with something like a Reinhardt, for example, and they hit and run against him. Chill Speed in that aspect is better because we need to get speed low on the opponents to make sure that Dorothea and Thrasier perform to the best of their abilities. So in this specific instance, Chill Speed is more valuable than Chill Attack would be. Also, Chill Speed can sometimes help against units that might otherwise double Jorge because of Jorge's middling speed, right? Jorge's speed isn't the worst in the world, but it's super middling. It's not going to help him out in any cases. Chill Speed can sometimes, not a lot, but sometimes prevent enemies from doubling into Jorge over here. So that is Mirabilis. She is a great support unit. I very highly recommend her. The only disadvantage that she might have is Whimsical Dream's +5 attack bonus is very susceptible to panic. So that is kind of her weakness. If you have a panic manner that goes, let's say, centered on Mirabilis here, it can affect all of Dorothea, Soth, Jorge, all those guys, or if you have someone with Panic Smoke, for example, or a Panic Staff, that makes Whimsical Dream actually a detriment to you as opposed to an asset. But otherwise, she is a very strong unit, and I very highly recommend her. Moving on, we have Summer Dorothea. So Summer Dorothea has a Sky Mayogi Dagger that's been refined, plus HP Speed 2, plus an HP asset, which means that her HP is actually the highest on the team. She actually is the top of the Infantry Pulse chain. And when you set up an Infantry Pulse team, you want your support units to be the top of that chain, because your support units aren't made to engage with their specials a lot. They're not meant to, hit like with a super hard bonfire like George is, or it is hit with a blazing wind like Ophelia is. They're meant to support. That's why they're there, right? So you want these units to have high HP so they can pulse those below them in HP. So this is an HP stacked Dorothea here to make sure that she is the top of the chain. She runs Sky Myogi, and I discussed at length kind of in the Dark Season tour about why Myogi daggers are so important, but just to review, Vantage Strategies are super common. So you see something like a Young Marth, or a Broadleaf Fan Soth, or Kranya, and Kranya is actually quite common in Astra Season. You see those 3 units especially are very good at vantaging. Oh, and also, it's Astra Season, so one of the mythic heroes that you'll see almost every game is Altina, and Altina herself is a Vantage unit. And so Myogi daggers counter those Vantage users. They disable skills that change attack priority. So they disable Desperation, they disable Vantage, they disable skills with Vantage-like effects, like Kranya's Athame dagger, right? So you want to have those effects because they're just super great. And I put it on a dancer here. That's not always ideal because you want your combat units to be in combat, but it does give Dorothea a purpose beyond just dancing. She actually can be a quite competent combat unit because of that. So she has kind of a dual role as both a combat unit and a support unit. So she has dance, obviously, like we talked about. She is a refresher, and she runs Ruptured Sky because it is probably the best 2-turn cooldown special. It has anti-synergy with lull attack speed because the lull attack speed actually lowers the foe's attack, but I think overall, and it actually has some anti-synergy with Whimsical Dream, but I think overall, this is going to be a better use of your special slot than Moonbow is most of the time. So Ruptured Sky is great in the fact that it deals a whole bunch of damage. It's also great in that it gives her kind of a dragon effectiveness in a sense, because she does have that plus 40 instead of plus 20 damage when she battles a beast or dragon foe. So that's great in the fact that up here, instead of running Cloud Myogi now, I can run Sky Myogi. And the reason why I run Sky Myogi instead of Cloud Myogi is that dragons during Astra Season are dead. They're not good. So you can run a dragon. I personally actually do run a Noe sometimes during Light Season, but if you ran a Noe during Astra Anima Season, it's gonna get blown up by Thrasier. Thrasier has dragon effectiveness, and Thrasier is one of the most common units because she's a mythic hero in this season. So dragons are not a good idea to run in Astra Anima Season, so Cloud Myogi is actually probably not super great. Sky Myogi, on the other hand, gives her effectiveness against something like a Brave Edelgard, which is going to be more and more common. You're going to see more and more of Brave Edelgard in terms of offense strategies. The thing about Dorothea being a good counter to Brave Edelgard is that Dorothea is a dagger unit, and if the Brave Edelgard is running her default Distant Ward instead of Distant Counter, which is the better skill, if they're running Distant Ward instead, then Edelgard cannot counterattack against Dorothea. So she's going to have to eat Sky Myogi's damage, which is effective damage, and between her attack and speed stacking and Ruptured Sky, she can actually put out a good amount of damage against the legendary Edelgard, or at the very least get her below that 25 HP threshold that makes Edelgard so dangerous. As long as she's above 25% HP, she's this incredible unit. When she gets below that threshold, it becomes dangerous for her. So Sky Myogi is good in that aspect because I'm expecting to see more and more Brave Edelgards. And then again, Ruptured Sky gives her that effective, kind of a version of that effective against dragons. She runs Life and Death 4 instead of something like Swift Sparrow or Attack Speed Push or anything like, because it gives her visible speed. And with HP speed, with Life and Death 4, with a speed refine on the Myogi, she actually has more speed than Thrasier, which means that Dorothea here is going to soak Chill Speed. And we need that because Thrasier needs as much speed as possible. She needs to maintain her speed as much as possible. And so Dorothea soaking that Chill Speed away from Thrasier makes Thrasier a better unit, because Thrasier, as opposed to these other units on the team, units like Soth, units like George, they are either incapable or not really looking to double. Most of those units are looking for a one round of combat, total nuke. They're just looking to one-hit KO an opponent, but Thrasier, more than any of my other units, are looking for a double. They're looking for a double because Thrasier has that desperation type effect. So she wants to stack speed as much as possible. Soaking speed away from soaking chill speed away from Thrasier makes it super, super great. So again, just like we talked about with Mirabilis here, you want your support units to soak shrines, you want your support units to soak chills as much as possible. So that's why we run Life and Death 4 on her. She also runs lull attack speed. You could run lull speed defense to improve her damage output, but Dorothea's defenses are so low. Like, she has 16 defense even after the 5 defense buff from Thrasier's mythic effect. Her defense is so low that I chose to use lull attack speed to hopefully improve her survivability just a hair. Because as long as the opponent doesn't stop her follow-up attacks, she should double a lot of opponents. She should double a considerable number of opponents. And if she attacks an opponent, they attack back, she attacks again, on that second attack, she's going to trigger Ruptured Sky. And so that's why she has that 2-turn cooldown special while she's speed stacking, is to hopefully fire off a Ruptured Sky with that second attack. She runs Infantry Pulse, like we talked about. She's the top of the Infantry Pulse chain. And then she runs HP Speed to give her that top tier HP, as well as help her speed out a little bit more to soak it away from Thrasier, and also just to make her a better combat unit to make sure she gets that follow-up to fire it off Ruptured Sky. So yeah, that's Dorothea. She is new unit on the team, new face, and I think she's going to be quite good. I think she has the right tools to be a super, super great unit. Ophelia. Ophelia is one of your most common, most hated Aether Raids defense units because of her Tome Mistletoe and its ability to quickly charge specials on the first turn. So she is actually overpulsed right now. She has like several extra pulses that she doesn't need. You could run something like Aether, but like why instead? But so she has accelerated special trigger, and that's super important. And then her tome itself gives -1 special cooldown for all your magic allies. So for this team, that means she's getting an extra -1 cooldown from Thrasier. Then she gets a bunch of pulses from her teammates, so she ends up being readily available to use Blazing Wind on her first combat. Now, these area of effect specials are super great. You might think they're great because they can hit units that are adjacent to each other. That's not really the point at all, actually. The really good thing about area of effect specials is that they work on the printed attack and res, in this case, of an opponent. So Ophelia's going to fly in from Guidance. She's going to get Danced and Whimsical Dreamed, which means she gets +5 attack. She's sitting at 69 attack then when she engages against an opponent. This Blazing Wind is going to take that 69 attack minus whatever the visible res value of the opponent is. So not including any kind of, you know, drive resistance or distant ward or, you know, Brave Lucina's weapon effect. Those are all disregarded. Those are invisible buffs. We're looking at just what is printed on the sheet right here. That res stat, you take the 69 attack minus whatever the opponent's res stat is, you multiply that by 1.5, and that damage is dealt before combat even starts. And that's what makes area of effect specials so great. It's not about the area of effect itself, it's about that effect right there. The visible attack minus the opponent's res. She runs Rally Resistance to set up the Rally Trap, and she runs Life and Death 4 because we want to boost that visible attack, right? So you could get more attack power out of Death Blow 4, for example. But we want the visible attack because that's what makes Blazing Wind so great. So Life and Death, even Life and Death 3, if you don't have Life and Death 4, is a better skill for Ophelia and other area of effect special users than something like Swift Sparrow 3 or Death Blow 4 or any of those kinds of skills. Now, she runs Special Spiral. You might be saying to yourself, like, that's a 3 cooldown special. How is she going to activate Special Spiral? Well, since Blazing Wind activates before combat, she'll Blazing Wind an opponent and then attack them, which means that after combat, assuming she kills the opponent, she usually kills the opponent, that means that she has a 2 cooldown remaining, and then Special Spiral subtracts 2 from that cooldown count. So then she can fire Blazing Winds off just continuously, as long as that opponent doesn't have something like Guard or Special Fighter. So that's really what we're looking for there. That's really makes her a great unit to be targeted by dances. It makes her a super powerful combat unit. She has Infantry Pulse to pulse down Thrasier to make sure she's ready to go. And then she runs Hardy Bearing. And Hardy Bearing Seal is important on any kind of area of effect special user. Because like we've been talking about, these specials go off before combat starts. So if you're engaging against, say, an Altina, very common unit in this type of season. You're engaging against Altina. Altina, if she got hit by Blazing Wind, would probably go down to 1 HP, 6 HP, something very, very low, which puts her in Vantage range. And that means that since you hit Blazing Wind before combat, now you're going into combat with Altina in Vantage range. And Altina will retaliate and will kill Ophelia in that Vantage range. So you run Hardy Bearing anytime you run a area of effect special to make sure that you're not charging up your opponent's Vantage for them, right? They don't have to step on any kind of bolt tower or injure themselves in any way. You'll just set up their Vantage for them if you don't run Hardy Bearing on your area of effect specials. That is the requirement. That is a required seal. You must use that if you want to be successful using an area of effect special unit like Ophelia. Next up, we have Thrasier, and we've been talking about Thrasier. She's a great unit. She's probably the best, honestly. Probably the best off. Bramimond's really great too. Hard bet. Discuss in the comments below. Who's better, Bramimond or Thrasier? So, Thrasier is one of the best offensive units in terms of being a defense hero. So an offensive, defensive hero. Weird to say. But she's a defense unit, defensive mythic that's great at offense. There we go. That got it out. Okay. So, we have a plus speed Thrasier here, and we're trying to stack speed on her as much as possible, because like we said, Thrasier wants to double. These other units can blow up a unit in a single round of combat. Thrasier wants to double. So Iffinger is great because it has the dragon effectiveness, so it kills Naga just instantly, because Thrasier has color advantage as well as the dragon effectiveness. It also drains 4 of all stats from the closest unit within 3 spaces in order to give Thrasier +4 to all of her stats. Makes her just a little bit, like, tankier, honestly. It also eliminates any kind of guaranteed follow-up your opponent might have from skills like Quick Riposte or Vengeful Fighter. It eliminates those as long as she's within 3 spaces of that ally and can use this draining effect. That doesn't usually super matter, because usually Thrasier will kill an opponent if she gets an attack off during the player phase. If Thrasier can engage against you, you're probably dead. But if she doesn't, then, you know, that can improve her survivability, can improve her bulk. So even though she's not super bulky, 20s in the defenses, Iffinger gives her +4 defense and res as well. So that can make her survive just a little bit better if your opponent is counting on something like a Quick Riposte or Vengeful Fighter to retaliate against you. She runs Luna. You could run Dragonic Aura here. Her attack does get pretty high, but doesn't get nearly as high as something like Bramimond's does or anything like that. So I actually prefer Luna personally, because you will often encounter attack debuffs. You will have ways your opponent debuffs your attack, and Luna's just a little bit better because Thrasier is going to engage against high-res opponents, high-res tanks quite often. You can, again, it's just a matter of preference. You can run Dragonic Aura if you find it to be more successful. It's all going to depend on the type of enemies you encounter. It does kind of have some anti-synergy with Killing Intent as well, but I still think it's the better special. I still think it's the better option, honestly. So we run Swift Sparrow 3. Again, we're trying to speed stack. You could run Darting Blow 4, but that's like not a super great skill in general. It's only 2 more speed, and I would much rather have that +6 attack than that 2 more speed. A lot of times it's going to be either overkill, or you would have rather had the +6 attack anyway. Killing Intent is what makes Thrasier so scary when you see her. So Killing Intent is active anytime the target is damaged, or if anytime they have a penalty on them. You have lots of ways to get penalties on your opponent. Like we talked about with Mirabilis, you have Dark Shrine, Bright Shrine, Panic Manor, Tactics Room, Whimsical Dream, dagger debuffs from their after combat effects. All of these provide visible buffs that allow Killing Intent to go off. And when Killing Intent goes off, it inflicts speed and res -5, which is great because that effectively gives Thrasier +5 speed, +5 attack. So she's getting faster, she's getting stronger compared to her opponent. And it also gives her a desperation effect, meaning she can make a follow-up attack before the opponent can counterattack. So that's why you want to speed stack on your Thrasier. She wants to go twice in on the opponent and just blow them up. So that's Killing Intent is an incredible exclusive skill. That's a really good skill for her. And then I run her default Panic Smoke because Panic is a good status regardless, but also it gives a penalty to your opponent. It puts a penalty on your opponent. So for some reason, you're attacking against a super high-res tank and they actually survive the 2 attacks from Thrasier, because they weren't panicked or something, they didn't have a debuff of any kind on them, then Panic Smoke is going to inflict a debuff on them. It also inflicts it within 2 spaces, so again, it's just providing debuffs that keep Flower of Ease active, that keep Killing Intent active. And then we run the Swift Sparrow Seal as well, because we're trying to stack that speed up, trying to keep that speed up so that she is doubling her opponents as much as possible, so that you get the maximum value out of Killing Intent. Something I just want to note really fast, I've seen when I've been doing my offense plays, people using actually the Hardy Bearing Seal on Thrasier, and you might think to yourself, oh, that's a good idea, because Altina exists, she's a red unit, she's super common, and she's a Vantage user. So Altina can come in and blow up Thrasier if she doesn't have a Hardy Bearing way to get around that. And you'd be right, except for one thing. Hardy Bearing, it disables the units and foes' skills that change attack priority. So it disables your own skills that change attack priority. So if you go in, you're only going to get that first attack off when you use Hardy Bearing Thrasier. I don't think that's ideal. Maybe you can kill a Vantage ready Altina in one hit, but I don't think that's super common. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. I think using a Swift Sparrow Seal and just doing your best and having your other units be your Hardy Bearing users, like Ophelia, like Dorothea, that's going to be better for you. I don't think using Hardy Bearing in the Seal, I think that neuters the effectiveness of Killing Intent in a lot of ways. So I would strongly discourage you from using Hardy Bearing Thrasier. If you think that's a good idea, again, like, more power to you, whatever, but I personally would not recommend it even a little bit. Moving on, though. Last but not least, we have Soth, and Soth is actually a transfer over from my Dark Season team. So, as opposed to using a Myogi Dagger like I had him in my Dark Season, we've actually got him over here using Ouch Pouch. And Ouch Pouch is actually a free-to-play skill, which is great because it's a very, very strong dagger. It gives you -2 special cooldown on turn 1. That means that he is ready to go with an Ignis on turn 1 between Ouch Pouch, a Times Pulse, and then an Infantry Pulse from Dorothea. He can get a 4 cooldown special off on that first turn. And so we choose Ignis here because we're actually defense stacking this Soth. So Soth gets +5 defense from Thrasier's Mythic bonus. He's getting plus defense from the Ouch Pouch Refine. And then he's getting +10 defense from Sturdy Impact. So he gets quite up there in terms of his defense. It's quite nice, actually, to watch. He has 36 base, so he gets up to 46 defense on initiation. And then 80% of that is dealt to the enemy in terms of the special. So that's really super cool. That's a bigness. That's a very, very bigness that you're firing off against opponents there. So Soth has Sturdy Impact, like we just talked about. That is using his 2 relevant stats, his attack and his defense, boosting them both up. But again, it's also improving his survivability because it stops enemy follow-up attacks. So he is survivable. He can engage in multiple rounds of combat. And that's why we use attack defense lull as opposed to speed defense lull here. Speed defense lull will probably get you more kills overall, but attack defense lull improves Soth's survivability. It makes him able to engage in more and more multiple rounds of combat because that attack lull is going to make him sturdier. It's going to make him a little bit harder to kill, a little bit bulkier. And then the defense lull obviously improves his damage greatly. We've already talked about Times Pulse, getting Ignis ready, doing all that jazz. I run Deathblow in the Seal here because, again, Soth is a unit that can probably engage in multiple combats. And so, although if you ran Sturdy Blow, that would actually improve the Ignis attack's damage output by 1 over Deathblow. Deathblow will be better in the long run. It'll be better for your second, third engagements. It's also better if you get hit by a Pulse Smoke and your special is not ready on turn 1. Your Ignis is not ready to fire off. Deathblow will actually improve that first attack you have there. So that is the team there. That is my new and improved Astra Anima team that we've got here. I just want to go over the map now a little bit. So this is actually a pretty common map. This is not super original, not super creative. This is something that you have probably seen when you have played your your offense strategies. You've done your offense during the week. The one difference is a lot of players, when they make this map, will put their accessories down here and their Aether structures down here and all that jazz to try and slow an opponent down, however it may be, to try and slow an opponent down and give them less options to engage with, a slower engagement. I don't think that's super ideal, because then, like we talked about in my Dark Season video, your opponent can create choke points. They can selectively eliminate these structures instead of just taking them all out. They can selectively eliminate these structures to create little chokes and funnel your units down one by one into those choke points. So that's why I prefer usually to have a much more open setup here, so that we can freely explore this area a lot more. In terms of my defense units, they have more options to engage enemy backliners in, or enemy mythics in, all that kind of stuff. So that's why we put our accessories over here, because they block the Aether structures, and because your opponent wants to get those Aether structures, sometimes they'll miss position, and they'll put units in the danger zone, or just out of the danger zone, and then they get hit by dances they weren't expecting because they were trying to take out the Aether structures. So that's why the Aether structures are back here a little bit more. That also helps protect these Dark Shrine, Bright Shrine structures over here on the far right side in the back corner. So it protects your defensive structures a little bit better. We have our Panic Manor and our Tactics Room. Both of those are debuffs for Thrasier and also for Flower of Ease, so that makes them better. They're also just good generally. Tactics Room, actually the range goes all the way down below the fortress here, so any units that are even on the very, very back line will get hit by Tactics Room, usually, so that'll actually slow down ranged opponents. That's pretty good. Panic Manor is a good structure generally, and not only does it provide a penalty for exploitation by Flower of Ease and Thrasier, but it also makes your opponent's visible buffs kind of a liability, so they have to either take out that Panic Manor or not use visible buffs. Healing Tower is stuck over here because it is hard to snipe. We always want our Healing Towers to be hard to snipe to keep your units at high health. The problem with having the Healing Tower over here is that it misses George. So George, if he gets hit by a Bolt Tower or something, is kind of a sitting duck, will kind of be at low HP there, and that's sad for him, but that's what it's going to be. The reason why that is because you can put your Healing Tower over here. This makes it more easily snipeable. You can snipe it from this space next to the Tactics Room, for example. And also, it makes your Panic Manor kind of in a weird spot where it's not really hitting any of the common engagement points that your opponent might have. So putting the Healing Tower over here to the left is more ideal, even though George is over here. Probably going to die if you get hit by a Bolt Tower. Press F for George. I have my Bolt Trap here, and that is the real one, and that is because your opponent can actually try to engage Thrasier from that space, and you don't want that to happen at all, ever. Because Thrasier is as fast as she is, and as somewhat bulky as she can be with Ifringer, she will still get taken out. She doesn't have the highest HP in the world. Her defenses are only mediocre, middling, so she can get blown up, so you got to be careful. That's why that Bolt Trap is there. Sadly, if you have a Lilina with a disarm trap, for example, then she actually could stand on this spot right here, disarm that trap, kill Thrasier, and then swap out with a tank that's standing over here to the left of the fortress. That is definitely the way to beat this team. If you're looking for a way to beat strategies like this, it's with a disarm trap Lilina and supported with your tank, and then swapping back here. Lilina is very safe back here behind the lake next to the fortress, and then your tank can come over here and have all kinds of fun tanking through all of these hits that you would receive. So yeah, that is the tour. That is the analysis of my defense team. Hopefully you guys learned something that you can apply to your own team. Hopefully you've gotten some ideas for how to make your own team better. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to help you out. I'm very happy to help you guys out with any kind of questions you might have about how to make your Aether Raids defense team a little bit better. Besides that, hope you guys all had a good day, and I'll see you later.